Mr. Secretary General, Mr. Undersecretary General, Excellencies, respected representative of victims of terrorism, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to welcome you today to this event on the occasion of the International Day of Remembrance and Tribute to the Victims of Terrorism. I would like to begin by making a special mention of those victims of terrorism that we have the privilege to have with us here today. They are the protagonists, and we will have the opportunity to hear their stories and experiences, which are reflected also in the photographic exhibition inaugurated today. It is important that we keep the memory of the terrible acts that have caused so much pain. Future generations need to know what happened to be better prepared to avoid this type of tragedies. Spain will always support the victims of terrorism on that path. Giving voice to the victims and accompanying them are one of the main objectives of the group of friends of victims of terrorism that was constituted last June. The creation of this group is only the first step towards continuing the work in favor of the victims, their rights, and their memory. And we hope that most of the member states will join this group of friends. I would like to ask all of you joining us in a minute of silence in honor of all the victims of terrorism. Please rise. Thank you very much. May I ask His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, to address the meeting, please.
Dear representatives of the victims of terrorism, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to welcome you to the second International Day of Remembrance of and Tribute to the Victims of Terrorism. The threat of terrorism and violent extremism is among our most complex challenges. In recent months, we have witnessed horrific attacks in Kabul and Cairo, Nigeria and Burkina Faso, and other locations around the Lake Chad Basin and around the world. Many innocent lives have been tragically cut short. My deepest sympathies go out to the families of the victims of the Kabul attack last week, their lives tragically taken as the celebrated life at a wedding. My thoughts are with them and with all the victims and survivors of such ruthless atrocities which cause lasting damage to families, communities, and nations as a whole. I met with survivors of terrorist attacks early this year and was deeply moved by their courage and resilience. And their message was clear and simple. People and communities need to become closer to grow stronger. Let us turn these harrowing experiences into powerful and positive forces for change. And this is a lesson for us all. Traumatic memories cannot be erased, but we can help victims and survivors by seeking truth and justice, lifting their voices, and upholding their dignity. We must do more to support victims and survivors of terrorism so they can rebuild their lives and heal. And this means partnering with civil society and community organizations that do excellent work in this area. By building on the efforts of the General Assembly to enhance international cooperation and by working closely with the group of friends of victims of terrorism, we can find innovative ways to support victims' rights to justice, reparations, healing, and livelihoods. And I thank the permanent representatives of Afghanistan and Spain for their vision and leadership in establishing this group of friends and for bringing this issue to the forefront of the global counterterrorism agenda. Next year, the United Nations will build on this momentum and host a Congress of Victims of Terrorism. It will be a unique opportunity to listen to people from around the world and strengthen our collective resolve to be impactful. As you hear the voices of those who are with us today and read the stories accompanying the photo exhibition, I hope you are as inspired as I am by their remarkable resilience. And we must be equally steadfast in our pursuit of solutions and be guided by the voices of victims and survivors in all our efforts. Let this moment be one of reflection, recognition, and action, and let us do everything we can to ensure that the plight of victims of terrorism is no longer a forgotten one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General, for your inspiring words, which are a faithful reflection of your constant commitment to the victims of terrorism. Next, on behalf of the group of Friends of Victims of Terrorism, the Ambassador Permanent Representative of the Afghan Republic, Her Excellency Mrs. Adela Raz, will take the floor.
Your Excellency, Mr. Secretary General, Your Excellency, Mr. Voronkov, distinguished ambassadors, respected representatives of the victims of terrorism, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the group of Friends of Victims of Terrorism, I welcome you all to this photographic exhibition on the occasion of the Second International Day of Remembrance of in tribute to the victims of terrorism. 2 years ago, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 72-165, proposed by Afghanistan, which proclaimed this day, the 21st of August, as the International Day dedicated to the victims of terrorism around the world. On this day, we reiterate our firm commitment to the fight against terrorism in all its forms and manifestation, and to the recognition and support of victims of terrorism and their families. This year, the General Assembly has taken a further step by adopting Resolution 73-305, proposed by Afghanistan, on the enhancement of international cooperation to assist victims of terrorism. This important resolution urges member states to develop comprehensive plans in order to provide both immediate and short-term assistance to victims and to ensure that the voices of those affected are given the attention they deserve in the aftermath of these attacks as they rebuild their lives. The pain of the survivors, the victims, and those who lose their beloved ones to this new phenomena and challenge of the 21st century, meaning terrorism, is felt and experienced extensively by the people of Afghanistan. The non-stop violence and the killing of innocents by terrorists has left our nation with a deep wound. Just not too long ago, this week in a wedding ceremony, a suicide attacker killed more than 60 civilians. In the following day, in the city of Jalalabad, there were 10 constant explosions that led to the injury of more than 120 people. These attacks leave us all in mourning and make us shattered. But we again stand up and survive terrorism through the power of resilience, the story of all victims in the story of this exhibition here today. Your Excellencies, victims of terrorism need and deserve sustained support and attention by the United Nations and its member states. And to express our support this year, on June 25th, 24 countries together with European Union and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation established the Group of Friends of the Victims of Terrorism. Our goal is to raise awareness on the situation of victims of terrorism and maintain the momentum of this 2-year movement through a series of concrete objectives. This is merely the beginning of the process, and we are here to join, and we would like all of you to join us in this important effort. Terrorist attacks have devastating consequences on the lives of the victims and their families, leaving a trail of death and destruction. In the case of Afghanistan, as said, as a country at the forefront of the fight against international terrorism, which has made enormous sacrifices in facing this threat, we have seen this story all too often. Nonetheless, where we have seen stories of pain and despair, we have also seen stories of personal resilience, strength in the face of trauma and shock. Today, we inaugurate a photographic exhibition that shows us precisely some of these stories, highlighting the voice of resilience of those men and women in Afghanistan and all over the world. To listen to the voices of the victims and witness their stories is not only a form of tribute, but also the best means of understanding the harsh realities that they and we all face in order to better be prepared to assist them. On this day, I would like to express, on behalf of all members of the group of Friends of the Victims of Terrorism, our firm commitment and support to continue working both with and for the victims of terrorism until they receive the recognition and support that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ras, for your words. It has been an honor and a lesson to work with the Afghan Embassy, the Afghan Mission, and with you personally in all these events. And now we will have the opportunity to listen to 3 victims of terrorism that honor us being here today to share their stories and their resilience. There will be Mrs. Maureen Basnicki from Canada, Mrs. Sara Tikolo from Kenya, and Mrs. Thelma Stover from the United Kingdom. Please, if you could come and have the floor.
Secretary General, Undersecretary General, ambassadors, victims, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maureen Basnicki, and I would like to thank the United Nations for inviting me to share my experience with you today. My world was shattered when my beloved husband Ken was murdered in the 9/11 attacks in 2001. I was on a layover in Mainz, Germany, as an Air Canada flight attendant and was unable to return to my home in Toronto, Canada, where I lived with Ken and my children, Erica and Brennan. The skies had closed that day. Many positive things have helped me to cope with Ken's death in the past 18 years. But part of my healing process has been working tirelessly to advocate for victims of violent crime and terrorism. I have gained my support and strength through meeting and connecting with other victims of terrorism from the global community. My greatest pride was on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, when the former Canadian Prime Minister declared September the 11th as a National Day of Service and Remembrance in Canada. It is aimed to inspire everyone to show compassion by engaging in community service for worthy causes and leaving a permanent legacy for the 24 Canadians who perished in the 9/11 attacks, including my husband Ken. I respectfully ask the United Nations to mandate and strongly recommend that cross-border victims, whether they were visiting or living in another country, are fully supported by their home country, and to ensure that this support is available not just in the immediate aftermath of the attack, but certainly for the long term. It's almost 18 years since Ken was murdered, and I still live with the consequences, as do many other victims of terrorism all around the world. It takes a second to shatter someone's life forever. It takes the rest of a lifetime to rebuild it. All global victims of any type of terrorism need your support. Thank you.
And Secretary General, Secretary General, Under Secretary General, ambassadors, and my fellow victims, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sarah Tikolo. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. On 7th August 1998, my husband, Geoffrey Moses Namai, was killed in the attack in the United States of American Embassy, Nairobi, Kenya. I instantly became a widow at 21 years old with a 4-month-old son called Nigel Andika Namai. I have lived with the pain for these many years, and it has been hard on my side. Having a son has helped me, so has being around my family and my friends who have been very supportive. I wanted to be a role model to my son, to be strong for him, to help him live his dreams, and to be there for him. I have strengthened my role to be both a mother and a father so that he wouldn't feel left out or feel something was missing. I recently decided that in order to help my son and myself, that I needed to forgive. And this is the only way for me to move forward. Holding on to unforgiveness, bitterness, and anger was not helping it at all. In fact, it was doing more harm to me, physically and emotionally. And that is why I now have a job as a janitor at the U.S. Embassy, Nairobi, Kenya. And I have a means to keep and support my family. And how to get support for my son who is pursuing his studies at the university. I couldn't be more proud of him and what he has achieved. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share my story today and to be able to present many victims of terrorism, especially those in Kenya who don't have a voice. And I would like to ask the United Nations to help all the victims to receive proper compensation, to help us rebuild our lives, particularly in getting an education and provide support to help others who go through trauma, both in short term, but most importantly, in the long term. Thank you for listening to me.
Secretary General, Under Secretary General, ambassadors, friends of terrorists, and everybody else who's here. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. My name is Thelma Stober, and I live in England. On the 7th of July, I was traveling to work, having been instrumental in bringing the Olympics to London, when a bomb was detonated on a tube that I was in. 52 people lost their lives, and hundreds were injured. I suffered significant permanent injuries, including the loss of my limb and damage to internal organs, which changed my life forever. Having been fortunate to survive the atrocity, resilience for me has been the unrelenting determination, fortitude, drive to achieve my purpose. That purpose is to use my experience, to use my professional skills, to make a positive difference to the lives of victims and survivors of terrorism and other crimes. My late mother told me that God had a purpose for my life, that I should use my second life to make a difference to the lives of others. A world where there's tolerance, acceptance of differences, civility, respect, dialogue, forgiveness, and peaceful coexistence. Terrorism is a global problem, and as much as we would all like to, it's highly unlikely to go away very soon. We are innocent victims whose lives have been permanently changed by these atrocities. We are the wounded soldiers. The trauma from terrorism has caused lasting damage not only to ourselves as individuals, but to our families and to our communities. Yet all of us in various ways want to continue to make a positive difference. We should be provided with timely, consistent, fair support, access to justice, to facilitate building our lives and a resilience, so that we can become trailblazers, not only for ourselves, but for other victims. We shouldn't have to fight and beg for assistance and information. We have a voice and a key role to play, working with you all, working in solidarity with governments, with communities and organizations to fight against terrorism. We should be supported and not be the forgotten people. A lot has been said about supporting victims of terrorism. If you look at the internet, there are strategies, policies, guidances, UN declarations. I asked you the question, who monitors to ensure effective, fair, transparent, and equal implementations of these commitments? Who holds member states to account for commitments that they've signed up to? Secretary General, this is a role, in our view, the UN should play. My message to you, sir, my plea to you, is to do your very best to make this happen and to help build our lives, our resilience, so that we can stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity in the fight against terrorism. But member states, you are the implementers, you have a role, you can make it happen. Don't let us down. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing with us your stories, your resilience, and your example. They help us understand your experiences and strengthen our commitment with these objectives. And lastly, I have the honor of giving the floor to His Excellency Vladimir Voronkov, Under Secretary General of the UN Office of Counterterrorism, who will do the final remarks. Thank you.
Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending the launch of this photographic exhibition to commemorate the International Day of Remembrance of and tribute to the victims of terrorism. First of all, my words of respect to all of them, and in particular to those who have joined us today. I would like to thank the group of friends of victims of terrorism for co-hosting of this event, and my words of gratitude to Saudi Mission for financial support of these events. I would also like to thank Sarah, Maureen, and Thelma for their sincere, emotional, and impactful stories. These stories left no one indifferent. This day is for victims and survivors of terrorism. We want to hear your voices, listen to your experience and your thoughts as how we can strengthen our commitment to you. We have heard that resilience means to each of you. Each meaning is very personal and not the same. This is what resilience is about: unique individuals seeking their own path toward healing. This path is not an easy one. It requires strength and determination, and I am always humbled by the courage and dignity of those who take it. The photographic exhibition shows just this. We asked each survivor what was the one thing that helped them become resilient. This ranges from life itself to family, art and books, forgiveness and mindset, showing that resilience is a multidimensional. To truly help and support victims and survivors, we must understand what they need, and I am sure that this exhibition makes it clearer. Mr. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, we now have stronger mechanisms to act. The General Assembly has mandated my office to strengthen the work of organizations on victims of terrorism, and we intend to broaden the scope of our victims support program to include many of the issues highlighted in the exhibition and in your statements. The establishment of Group of Friends of Victims of Terrorism is another step forward in the commitment to the international community towards victims. The next milestone will be the first Global Congress of Victims of Terrorism, which will be held next year here in the United Nations in New York during the second Counterterrorism Week. We need to start working on it without delay. Ladies and gentlemen, on this day we remember all the victims of terrorism around the world. We pay tribute to those whose lives were stolen and to those left behind. Thank you for attending this event. I encourage you to visit the exhibition. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I kindly ask you to remain seated while the Secretary General leaves. Thank you again for your participation.